welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and biologist putrefiers, to that 6+++ show. I'm your host, Tom. I'm back for State of Play, and it's going to get smelly in here. We are talking about Nurgle's boys. We're going to be talking about the Death Guard tonight, making our very own Ed Fawcett very angry wherever he is, I'm sure, as he's a known Death Guard doubter and hater. But we've got a true Death Guard believer on tonight. I am joined by the one and only Aiden Smalley. Aiden, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Cheers for having me on, man. And yeah, definitely a Death Guard believer. I can say that for sure.
yeah. I've been a follower and a listener of yours for quite a while because obviously you do various different things with Death Guard, and they're an army that's quite close to my heart. I played them when I first got back into the game in 8th edition. They were the army that I bought, and I got the sort of the box set and everything else. So I've got very fond memories with Death Guard. I haven't played them much in recent times, but I do love them to bits, and it's always nice to hear how they're getting on. And they are having something of a moment. They've been having a good few months. So I'm really excited to talk about that and get into where they currently sit in the game, because possibly the best Chaos army right now. I think you could probably say. They're knocking on the door. They're
Definitely.
knocking on the door. They're in a great spot. So before we get into Death Guard specifically, Aiden, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background in the 40k?
So I started at 40k back in 7th edition.
Okay.
I actually got into it kind of just by visiting. I was watching like mini wargaming on YouTube, and my mates messaged me. He's like, "Oh, what are you up to tonight?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just watching this nonsense thing. You won't care." He was like, "Oh, what's it about?" And I explained it. He was like, "You know about Warhammer?" I was like, "You know this?" And he was like, "I play this," and I was like, "Oh."
Nice.
So we went to a Games Workshop store, as you all do, and yeah, that was like that was the first hits free. So from that point, basically got hooked into it. Got the starter box. I actually, now this is probably going to like disturb people to find this about me. I actually almost went with Tau. I played Dawn of War before I even knew this was like a tabletop thing, and I just played Tau on that, and then. But the guy I went with played Tau. I was like, okay, so I'll try something different. And then Chaos Marines were in the starter box because Death Guard didn't exist in 7th. But I was like, okay, I'll get them. Went home, went on all the lore channels that you could find. I was like, this Nurgle fella's pretty cool, so I'm going to paint my guys green. And so basically just kind of went off from there. Worked for GW for a bit in the store.
Oh, nice.
Lost all passion for the hobby from working in the store.
Yeah.
And turns out if you're teaching people to paint all day, the last thing you want to do when you get home is like paint.
I can believe it. Yep.
But it was a good experience still. But then obviously left that, and then sort of like got the hobby drive back. 8th edition came out, launch box came with it. There we are, brand new Death Guard. I was like, here we go. And that's and since then basically I've just been playing Death Guard. It's pretty much all I play. I do have like a bit of Votan and a bit of Nurgle Demons. But since they've came out, they're what I've been taking competitively, and I've fully focused on trying to get the most out of Death Guard, and then somehow got all right at the game. Learned what tournaments were, did all right at tournaments, got a little bit better there. And now apparently I own a YouTube channel all about Death Guard. So yeah, that happened.
So I mean, tell us about that. Tell us about your sort of Death Guard sort of podcast existence, because you're one of the sort of premier faction specific podcasts.
Somehow I have no idea how that happened. So yeah, I run the Disgustingly Resilient podcast with my co-hosts Will and Death Guard Dave, who's Reset Edition. And basically it started out just as, hey, what if me and you, Will, background to me and Will, we're just like, you know what, there is no dedicated like Death Guard thing. Let's just have a podcast and we'll just talk about like opinions, and we'll see if anyone listens to it at all. And then like you get your first view and you're like, oh my god, someone actually likes it. And then you get your first thumbs up and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then you fast forward and you're talking about events and you're having like your first like balanced data slate episode, and people tune in, and it just kind of kept growing. And then it kind of exploded when on especially this edition release. So it was okay. We're getting like casual listeners. Kind of exploded when at the start of this edition, if you don't remember the original state of Death Guard, troubled, shall we say?
Yes, it was troubled.
that is not a great index, but I was like, okay, we'll see how it can work. So I took it to an event. It was only like, don't worry, it was like the second week of 10th edition being launched, and because we're all mental in the UK, we have a tournament apparently.
We are crazy. Yep.
Yeah, so packed me box up, went, and I managed to pull a 5-0 with it. This was at the time when everyone was like, Death Guard are unplayably bad, so people were just, I can't think that was kind of like the springboard that kind of got people to like tune into the podcast, and from there I was just like, shall we do this as like a full YouTubey thing?
Yeah, man.
And yeah, it just kind of like took off. So it's like tactic videos and stuff like that now. So anything Death Guard related in a competitive sense, that's kind of what we cover, really.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I say can't recommend Discussing Music podcast enough. Like it's super, super good. And I think I've got a big soft spot for faction specialists and people who just play the armies they love, whatever the weather. And I think obviously you are one of those. You're one of the sort of the people that you hear the name and you know exactly what faction you're associating with it. And I think that's really awesome. I think it's a dying breed in the game. And I really love to see it. And I'm pleased that that you were doing well with it, even when it was supposedly terrible, and B, that you've been enjoying yourself with it now that it's getting a little bit better and a little bit more serviceable as well. So before we dive into the specifics of Death Guard right now, you've obviously played them over a couple of editions.
Yep.
And you've got a very clear sense of the army and its lore and its feel. What would you say if we're thinking about the sort of the game as a total and Death Guard's kind of place in it? What is their role as an army? What's the function of Death Guard? Where do they fit in the game?
So Death Guard have had a bit of a shift
Mm-hmm.
from the 8th edition, 9th edition rendition, which is very Marmite depending on how people look at it. So
Yes.
American people, you don't know what Marmite is. It's a sort of like condiment over here, like a jam almost, which the going joke is you love it or you hate it.
Yes.
It's one or the other. There's no in between. No one's like, Marmite's all right. You hate it, you
it's,
love it.
it's polarizing.
Yeah. So Death Guard in 8th and 9th edition were basically, their entire identity was the durable boys. They were all about tankiness. The entire army had either feel no pain 5 up back in 8th edition,
Mm-hmm.
and then in 9th edition everything was -1 damage permanently.
Yes. Yep.
Now in 10th edition, and this is what caused a big sort of like ruckus and upset. I don't know if you've seen the South Park, it was like rabble, 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 rabble. It was like that in the Death Guard for a while. But -1 damage and feel no pain was all taken away from us.
Yes.
We still have a higher than average toughness, but we all know that's not really the breaking point of durability. It's nice though. And the core design elements of the army were a little weak on release, but the idea there was to be sort of like the debuff army, the one that sort of strips your opponent's defenses, makes them weaker, makes them more vulnerable, and sort of like turns all the wound rolls like again. So like you reduce their toughness by 1, maybe that's like equivalent to +1 to wound.
Yep.
And obviously you have abilities to reduce their movement, stuff like that. And it wasn't, the power wasn't there originally, but the concept was there.
Yes.
And if you were a Death Guard player, you either didn't mind this change or you hated it. Personally, I'm okay with it because the one thing I always say to people is durability as your entire faction identity is not a good place to be because the meta is in 1 or 2 places. You're too durable and no one has fun playing against you and it's miserable because you stand on objectives and win the game by no skill.
Yep.
Or the meta has evolved and you are very killable and you have nothing else going for you.
Yeah, 100%. And we're seeing this a bit with some of the Necron builds and with Custodes to a lesser extent as well, right? Those kind of armies where they're asking a question and there's either an answer or there isn't. As you say, there's a real limit to what the game possibilities and what the expression possibilities are with that. So as you say, I actually think there's parallels with the stuff they're doing with Death Guard now to how I play a little bit of Nurgle in AOS. And Nurgle in AOS also has this kind of sort of drippy, weakening you, chipping away at you over time kind of feel. And sort of brings different surprises through debuffs. And I think there's a lot more that you can do with that. And as you say, definitely gives you scope for showing off your ability a little bit more than just here's the stuff, you can't kill it.
You go from being a stat check army to one that actually requires you to think about where you put your debuffs and what you're doing correct, rather than here's 10 Black Lord Terminators. You've brought an entire army of damage 2. Unlucky, mate.
Yeah, my Drakari ran into that plenty of times, and they did not like it. They did not like it at all. It was a bad time. So yeah, I mean, let's think about the changes that we got pre this slate. You actually got some love a few months ago, didn't you? And I actually think this is when we started to see what could happen with Death Guard really open up. And that was with the new Contagion options on top of the -1 toughness. So obviously, for the uninitiated, this lets you either affect the enemy's save, make it worse. It lets you worsen their weapon or ballistic skill. And the other one is an OC
and leadership.
And leadership impact as
very
well.
Niche,
right?
But...
And so, I guess as a long-time Death Guard player and as someone who'd already been playing them in 10th, how did you find this sudden injection of change? And which of these do you like? What are your go-tos?
I love any rule that lets you make a choice and then
Yes.
be rewarded for the right choice.
Yes.
And having the option, now admittedly, one of those options is probably a lot more niche than the other two,
Yeah.
but it's really good it's a good feeling when you pick the right option and it
Mhm.
plays out how you thought and you start seeing the impact that your choice made, whether that
Yeah.
stuff is dying much quicker or you're surviving places that you normally wouldn't.
Mhm.
Um, and it also emphasized contagion because -1 toughness is pretty good. It
Mhm.
can a lot of people say it's terrible, but it's not
No,
really because even dropping
it
like a
adds up.
toughness 10 to toughness 9,
Mm.
your strength 5 weapons are basically getting +1 to wound,
Yeah.
which is still really good. Now, don't get me wrong, it's obviously better at lower levels like T4 to T3, but that's where it becomes ridiculous. Like in the infantry fights, that -1 toughness really hurts.
Mhm.
But that wasn't sort of enough reason for you to forcibly get aggressive to put someone in -1 toughness.
Mhm.
But now with the option to like get someone -1 toughness, -1 save, or your -1 to weapon skill, ballistic skill, and positioning matters a lot more. And
Yes.
it just rewards player skill to be able to put stuff in certain places. Even like say there's an angle, a really tight angle that an enemy can take to get shots on you, but you put someone near that angle hidden, so that if they take the angle, they're going to be stuck in the -1 aura. So then you can
Yes.
reduce someone's output.
Yes.
It opened up other combinations. It really brought the book to life. It gave the damage to the book. It
Mhm.
gave the durability to the book, but in a different way that wasn't just, oh, I'm tough.
Yes.
And it opened up a lot of other combos as well, which is really cool for when you're making a list build.
No, completely agree. Because actually, once you have Contagion doing more than just the toughness, there's a few nice little combos and synergies in the index that actually sing a lot more for that, right? And it's
Yeah.
actually, in terms of the units and the interplay between the unit choices and strats and enhancements, it's got a lot of nice little combos. The Death Guard index, it's actually quite deceptive in there's a lot going on in there,
Yeah.
but I think having more ways to have this affect the enemy was crucial to making it actually feel more relevant. And what it definitely does to have now is that feeling of, which is very Nurgly, which is like, okay, they look all right far away, but once you get near them, it all gets really horrible really, really fast. And I think it feels like it's kind of anchored Death Guard as one of those armies that if you are playing an army that needs to come and engage, they are the last thing you want to see, right?
Yeah.
Anything that wants to get up close and personal to play the game really dreads them. And actually, I think that's a really nice place for them to be. They're kind of this one of those nemesis of anything that's going to come in swinging, hoping for a fight. They're really really good in those situations.
Yeah, I'm happy to die on the hill that within 9 inches, Death Guard are probably the most lethal army in the game.
Yeah,
I had a game at a GT recently in the
yeah,
final round. I was against a Blood Angel player. The Blood Angel player had been doing like a mass jump pack Death Company rushdown build. So I got turn one. I just kind of moved up a little bit, got into a bit of positions. His turn one, he sent like 30 jetpack jump Death Company at me, 10 assault intercessors, jetpack stuff, and just killed all my screen completely. And then I picked up 1,500 points in one turn. It's like you do not come near Death Guard, and you will
you
remember
don't
this lesson.
you don't do that. Yeah, exactly. Blood Angels are exactly one of those armies where they're just like, oh no. I've had a few test games with Orcs as well, and you're like, no, just nowhere near that. I don't want anything to do with that. It's horrible. It's exactly where I don't want to be. And it's where I'm supposed to be. So yeah, no, I think that's really, really cool. I mean, before we dive into them in the current meta using all these different combinations, obviously they've had points changes here and there, but I think in the main stuff got cheaper a few months ago, and
Yes.
broadly it's not changed massively, has it? Like there's been nudges up and down here and there, but there weren't
Yeah.
massive shifts coming out of this slate on that front.
No, it was just kind of really indirect, took a bit of a hit. Plague
Yeah.
Marines, which were admittedly undercosted as hell,
Yes.
have gone to a more reasonable point level. But you also got some weird drops like Typhus, still don't
Yeah, I
understand,
saw that.
still don't get. But
No,
okay.
already
And
in most lists, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he
yeah,
should go down. He should go
yeah, we'll
down."
just
Yeah,
drop him down 20 points, only 20% off him,
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then you had like Death Shroud come down, which is only like 5 points, but it's still a bit
Yes,
like, why? It's like they were
yes,
really good, but okay. I guess
yeah.
they just wanted a 0 on the end, maybe. But
Maybe, yeah. Death Shroud are my favorite models in that range. I just
they're so cool.
The Death Shroud models are just something special. I think in terms of like, there's not a cooler faction specific Terminator out there that I can think of. I just think
It's a scythe. You have a
it's a
scythe.
side. They have size, and it's you genuine when you paint those and put them on the table. It's like I feel like I've painted three little characters. That's what they
Yeah,
look.
yeah.
They look and
That's
feel like a little baby character unit, and they do damage like a bunch of characters as well, which is
yeah, they're
awesome.
so cool. And they got the weapon skill too, so they feel proper elite as well. And you're like,
So
yeah.
beautiful. I loved them in ninth edition. They were gods. Like I just absolutely loved them.
They
They're
slapped anything they
so
touched.
so fun. Okay, so let's talk about the index then a little bit more broadly. I mean, you've now played a lot of games with this, so
Yes.
you can give us the TLDR on what you're getting the regular use out of. If we start with the kind of the stratagems, what stratagems in the Death Guard index do you find yourself leaning on very heavily?
Really quick and easy one to cover is just the -1 to hit stratagem.
Yeah.
It's great, means you can pop like smoke on a rhino and still -1 to hit something else.
Hmm.
You can combine it if someone's within your weapon skill and ballistic skill reduction
Yes.
contagion. They do stack. So
Yep.
people that don't know why it stacks, it's because one modifies a weapon skill ballistic skill characteristic, the other one modifies a hit roll, and the
Yes.
cap on modifiers being at 1 is on a hit roll. So they're two
Yes.
separate things. That's why they
So
do stack.
if you hit on fours, I have bad news.
Lol, said the Necron Wraith.
Yeah.
um, but
Excellent.
yeah, it's really simple. You don't really need to deep dive that one. It's a
No.
-1 to hit. But it's there. It's good to have.
Yeah.
Obviously, +1 AP is just always great. It
Yeah.
just gets you to stupid AP levels.
Yeah.
Death Shroud, if you've got -1 save contagion, the AP2 baseline, you slap this bad boy on, and now you're AP4 basically,
Yeah.
which is almost like ancient these days to see AP4 melee. Like even Redemptors like AP2 in melee, and you're coming along with
Yeah.
this scythe and just like, yeah, you don't get a save, mate. um, so that's again, it's fairly easy to use that one. One little disgusting thing that you can do with it is if you manage to proc the secondary effect on it, which is if the enemy is near a contaminated objective, which is admittedly not the easiest thing to do, but let's say it is, and you roll a critical wound, it gets an additional AP on top of the additional AP, which
Whoa.
is quite funny if you have anti-infantry flamers, because all anti-infantry wounds count as criticals. So your Death Shroud flamers go up to AP2, and then you can have
Wow.
-1 save contagion, so it's
Yeah.
AP3 on the flamers.
Wow.
Stupid.
Yes.
Again, you just kind of explode AP out of nowhere, which is quite funny. I
Yes.
think the most interesting one, well, I'll say the biggest duff one, is actually -1 damage, weirdly.
Okay, interesting.
It's good, but 2 CP in this economy is not happening.
No. No.
Death Guard also kind of a lot of times want to play fixed, which means you don't get the free extra CP.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's really hard to find a place where you're happy to spend 2 command points on that thing. When you need it, it's great, it's brilliant, but there's a lot of times you sat there going, "Oh, I could do a lot with these 2 CP."
Yeah, for sure.
But the most interesting one, what I love the most, and I probably use every game, is actually Boil Blight.
Okay.
It's one that people look at and firstly don't understand what the hell it does because it's really badly written. And then the second one, people don't understand like the applications of it. So to use it, you have to have one of an enemy unit within contagion range of anything in your army. Okay.
Okay.
So then you spend the command point, and then this is where people think it only affects the one of your units that's nearby. It doesn't. So now that's just a caveat to trigger the stratagem.
Okay.
So now ignore anything about those 2 units.
Okay.
So from now on, your army, if they shoot at that unit, gets the ignore cover and the heavy keyword, which is mainly the ignore cover is really good because if you are thinking of pressing the +1 AP button on a unit, but you've got 2 units to shoot at, you're generally just better putting ignore cover on it because ignore cover is effectively +1 AP anyway. But what's really good is obviously the combination with then you got your Plague Burst Crawlers who are then hitting on freeze because they can ignore the -1 from the indirect because they get +1 from the heavy, and then they ignore cover as well. And it gets even funnier when you're adding stuff like Mortarion and Lord of Virulences, and then you're hitting on 2s out of line of sight, ignoring cover, and the silliness happens. But it's a really good strategy on that one.
Yeah, very, very good. Yeah, excellent. So there's a very good suite there, and I think as you're already kind of alluding to, what we can see is that once you get those extra buffs that came in with the changes, suddenly those matter a lot because armored stuff just doesn't have a save. Stuff that isn't very good at hitting is now abysmal at hitting, and it just again means that if you've made the right choices, if you've lined up your right debuff, if you pick the right contagion and you put the opponent in the right position, then suddenly you are incredibly good at countering, and you're flexible and have tools to counter different types of armies, which I think gives them a lot more versatility than people necessarily give them credit for, both at range and in melee. Because that's the thing, and we talk about Death Guard, but they are in many ways a combat army, but actually, in the sort of close confines of primary play in 10th edition, their guns are very relevant because the whole battle happens in range of their guns. Let's face it, right? If you're going to fight over those objectives in the middle, you are going to be shot by all the stuff that the Death Guard bring, and it's now very, very potent indeed. Do you run any of the enhancements?
I do. So cheap and cheerful one's just Deadly Pathogen to give one of your smashy characters +1 strength, +1 attack.
Okay.
If you've got 10 points left, slap it on.
Yeah,
It's
no
decent
harm.
enough.
Yeah,
Or it's 15, I think it might be. The other interesting one is there's two interesting ones technically. So you've got Living Plague, which is the one that gives the character plus 3 inches to his contagion range,
yeah. Hmm.
which means if you drop in like a deep strike on turn 3, you actually have a 12-inch contagion, which means you can tag contagion from deep strike because normally it's 9, you have to be 9 away.
Yeah.
So you just that point one out. This is quite nice, and obviously just because of the impact of how important contagions are. One of the funniest things I've done is when a Tau Crisis blob drops in, and they're like, "Okay, I'm going to shoot you," and a rapid ingress behind a wall near them, but enough so the contagion with the +3 tagged them, so they
Oh
were shooting
no.
and hitting on 6s, and I was like,
That's so good. That's so funny. I love it. Absolutely love it. That's combination play, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the other interesting one, which I didn't really use until now because of certain meta, which we might get to,
Yeah,
is
we
that
will.
is -2 to charge. So
Ah,
it's nice to have.
yes.
Gets disgusting when you look at GW's latest iteration on stacking rules.
Oh wow.
So Malignant Playcast has an ability that doesn't apply a status effect to give a unit -2 to move and -2 to charge.
Okay.
Let's just say making Custodes -4 to movement and -6 to charge is hilarious.
I love it. I see. So that's where the Plaguecaster comes in. That's very, very cool. And yeah, they're one of those armies where if you can slow them down, they're getting hit by you for longer. That's really bad for them. Really, really
It's
bad.
even
Okay.
worse when you're
So
like, you can move 2 inches, but to do it, you're taking 8d6 anti-infantry flamer Overwatch. You want to
yeah,
just stand still instead? And you've
yeah,
basically killed the unit while never having to shoot it. It's great.
yeah. So good. So good. Okay, I mean, yeah. So obviously a ton of play there as well, and again, lots of little combinations you can get your teeth into, which is awesome. If we think about the suite of units, again, I think this is one of those indexes where actually there's a ton of cool stuff, and you can
Mhm.
basically take and combo into most of the stuff in here. But what are a few of the standouts? And maybe if you go with some of the obvious ones, and maybe pick out one or two of your sort of flex choices that are less well known as well.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so basically, I think this is probably one of the best internal balanced books
I agree.
indexes.
Yeah.
There is a lot viable apart from the Plague Surgeon. If I see a Plague Surgeon list, I'll hunt you down. Um,
Such a cool model, though. God damn it.
just to point out, 15 points more gets you Typhus.
Yeah. That's so
Stop taking
bad.
Plague
That's
Surgeons.
so bad.
It's awful. It's actually horrendous. But yeah, in general, obviously your Plague Marines are still like your workhorse, the bread and butter. Even with a 2 point increase per model, they're still really good because you get toughness 5 intercessor bodies, which aren't really tough, but name me a squad that gets more special weapons because they're just every single guy can have a melter gun, a plasma gun, a
Yeah.
blight launcher, power fists, all sorts of stuff. And they can multi-phase, they can take the flamers, you can have them geared for full melee, you can have them geared for full shooting. I like to keep it mixed because it lets you just approach different situations. But Plague Marines in either in 10, 7, and 5s are all viable. So Plague Marines is great. And OC actually, when you start playing with like high OC models, you actually start to realize OC can matter, like
It
genuinely.
really does. And it's an army that can actually put a lot of OC on points as you're trying to deal with it, which is really nice.
Yeah, you can generally win a game by just going 5 Plague Marines onto the opponent's like
Yeah.
natural their side objective every
That's
turn.
completely right. Yeah, as I say, they're one of those armies that if you just stand off them, they will happily stand off and win the game. They're very capable of doing that, which then forces you to go to the bad place to try and stop them.
To the no-no zone.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go in. It's the only way.
Obviously, as you said before, the biology professor, biology
Oh yeah.
inspire is
Oh yeah.
just silly. A lot of people were like, "Oh, that city's bad now because they nerfed the ability to chuck 4 grenades in one turn." What I will say to that is, do you know how many times I got to throw 4 grenades in one turn? Not that often. And
Yeah.
if I did, it wasn't because I did something clever. It's because my opponent screwed up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you've put Angren in my deployment zone turn 1. Thank you for the free kill.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that being gone is not really an issue. The
No.
fact he didn't go up in points is kind of wild because he just
Yeah.
gives the entire squad crits on fires and lethal on both
Yeah,
shooting and
that's the thing.
melee.
Even outside of the grenade double tapping, he's just a great little force multiplier for his unit
Yeah,
as well.
he's so good. And he's obviously the usual combo with the foul blight spawns. You have a unit with all the lethal hits on 5s and fights first. Just makes it really hard to approach.
Yeah.
So they're like the more common ones. Morty's an interesting one, especially after the recent
Yes, I
clarification.
wanted to pick your brains on Morty. Go
Should
on.
we leave Morty for after, or should we cover him now?
No, let's do it. Let's get into it.
Right.
We're sort of mixing around the different units. I'm well up for that. Let's do it.
So Morty is in a really interesting place. We all know Morty's output isn't why you take him.
No.
5 attacks for a Primarch is abysmal,
Yeah.
and it's not great. Like, don't worry, he can punch some things. Like, especially if he's not got an invuln, he's actually all right because he's like AP4 with like contagions and whatnot. So you can go punch tanks without invulns. That's fine. But the real reason you take Morty is the Lord of the Death Guard aura, which is the aura of ignore all modifiers, which probably in the current meta is probably one of the most relevant abilities you can have. You get to laugh at Catan. You get to laugh at Custodes, who try and pop -1 damage and -1 to wound on Wardens. You get to laugh at the indirect penalty while you pick up all the MSU Eldar that are running around the place. You get to laugh at any armor of contempt. Just say nope to that. While shooting it with your AP 4-5 last cannons, just like yeah. So it's a lot of good buffs. But the problem then is he's obviously 325 points. Death Guard's durability at the moment is mainly from the amount of stuff you can get.
That's it. It's going wide. Yeah.
Go wide Death Guard, and if you take Mortarion, there's a lot you can get. You can get triple bloat drone for 270, and then you've still got 50 points change.
Yeah.
Instead of Mortarion. And again, as we said, Mortarion himself doesn't directly contribute too much to like the output.
No.
He also has like aura of real ones to wound, which is nice. So Morty is a weird one. If you really don't like Necron players and you don't like Custodes players, he's a really good include. But the problem is he can also become a liability very quickly when you run into something that has the ability to just take him out like dead easily. You've accidentally paired into 3 Hammerhead Tau and they've got like a million like railguns shooting Morty turn 1. You're either going to be stuck in your deployment zone hiding from all game or you're going to die. And losing 325 points, again, it's not horrific. It's not like losing Magnus or something like that. It's not game over, but it's definitely a big hit. And another problem that Morty brings is it changes how you play fundamentally.
It does.
You cannot play go wide because you have to stay in Morty.
That's it. Everything has to stay around it. And so I've played against him at the last UT I was at, and there's a moment where you're like, your playable scores just have to split up now. You can't just stay with him all game and affect all of the board that you need to affect. And then at that point, you're not even getting the aura at this stage, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's drawing the balance when you're playing Morty of when do I leave Morty and when does Morty get aggressive or when does Morty just stay back for the game. It's almost a complete different way to play the army with Morty included.
Yeah.
So people are at the moment, the most question I get asked the most is Morty auto include? Is it Morty or Morty-less season? It can be both. I genuinely think.
I agree. Yeah. I think he's landed in a spot where he gives you a real hard answer into a few things. But as you say, the style that was actually bringing them success before the change suffers with him in it, right? That kind of massive width of cheap crap. I keep throwing stuff. I keep outscoring you. I keep blipping you wherever I want. And every time you kill something, I've got another thing to replace it. You surrender that style to take it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the style that the game's going, with like a lot of people are like, well, he is auto include because you just said the big words. You said the Custodes. You said the Necrons. And I get that, and I get that to a point. But I'd also argue the Necron match. I think it's more relevant. But I already reckon Death Guard kind of dumps the Custodes a lot of the times anyway. The Custodes really don't like anti-infantry, and the list I'm taking to Manchester GT has 28 anti-infantry flamers.
Amazing.
I have stated on my Discord, for members' Discord, I've stated I'm not going to Manchester GT to win. I'm going to ruin as many Custodes players' days as I can.
But that's exactly right. I think from a matchup standpoint, as you say, there are other ways of dealing with Custodes that, again, spread the threats more widely.
Yeah, and the problem is you run into matchups where Morty isn't super relevant. You don't really need it because not every army does have defensive layers. Like Drakari, for example, really good at going wide because they have such cheap units. And whether you have Morty or not, if you shoot a Drakari unit, it's probably dead.
Exactly right. It doesn't change the lethality really for us. Yeah.
Exactly, but the problem is with Morty there, they've now got like 3, 4 raiders full of dudes for the price of Morty. So
That's
that's a
it.
matchup where Morty can't stay near everyone because you're gonna have to go and chase stuff down and get value and kill stuff.
Completely right. Yeah.
And you can't have free and also just trying to move vehicles around Morty, like free Plagueis Cross following him around. Those are big models.
Yeah.
Um, and I learned recently that GT, I am not a good car park player. I am I'm much more of an infantry player than a car park player.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think you can either go Morty or you can go Morty-less. It
Yeah.
totally depends on your approach to the game.
I like that both are an option. I think actually quite a few of the Primarchs this time around have felt like, well, they're obviously in or they're obviously out. So it's nice to have a situation where I think, yeah, you can win a bunch of games whichever way you go, which is really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Okay, any other units you want to shout out whilst we're here?
So what have we got? Blow drones are actually really good.
Yeah, they're having a moment, right? They're having a moment.
Blow drones at 90 points is just kind of gross for the profile. Like regards to weapons or anything like that, it's it's T10, it's T10. I think it's like T10 or T9. It's T9 10 wounds. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's got 3 up and a 5 up invulnerable. For 90 points.
Yeah.
That is that's a spicy meatball.
It's chewy to get rid of. Yeah.
And you can then slap on even more anti-infantry flamers, a nice long-range, pretty decent AP shooting weapon, or the flesh mower. I'm not really a flesh mower kind of person. I like the flamers or the heavy blight launcher, but again, I think the book's in a state where all 3 weapons are viable, or you can genuinely have anything. And it totally depends on. This is one of the coolest things in general about the Death Guard unit choice at the moment. Your playstyle can really be reflected in your build.
Completely.
I'm a very tradey kind of person, so I have lots of 5-man plague marines, lots of rhino plays, bloat drones, which just kind of go off on their own. And it's like, yeah, you expose something to kill this 90-point plague drone, I'll pick up whatever you send out. If you don't, I hold the primary. Obviously, that's good. You've got full vehicle list of people that just like predators are really good at the moment. Oh my god, Death Guard predators are wild.
Yes.
It's like oh, okay, I get +1 AP if I'm shooting at infantry. Oh, cool, and you're also -1 save. So this auto cannon is now like effectively AP free. The heavy bolters are AP free. I can spend a CP to get up to AP 4.
So good.
Have fun with that.
Yeah, and again, cheap and cheerful. You can have a bunch of them in a list, can't you? It's really
130 points. Strat Reserve Predator is also one of the funniest things ever. Like people just don't expect a backdoor predators to show up and be like, haha. But it's hard to talk about what is good because I genuinely think, like I said, it is one of the best internally balanced books.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And
I think that's it. And all the characters, as you say, maybe not the Plague Surgeon, but I've seen stuff done with the Terminator Sorcerer. You can obviously do fun combos.
He's great.
With Plague Caster, Typhus is really good. Even the basic Lord has some fun combos if you layer different things on him. And the Lord of Contagion's fun. Lord of Virulence is fun. So you're just going down that roster, and there's just so many cool units that all work, but you can't take them all because then you get into a skewed situation. So you have to make design choices. I think that's really fun.
Even like the Blightbringer, which a lot of people say Blightbringer is useless, but -2 leadership as a Contagion aura actually gets more interesting when you get like Living Plague, and then you put -1 save on it, or another -1 leadership if you want, and then you like do stuff like using Plague Burst Mortars to trigger battle shocks on Custodes. So now they can't fight first, they can't -1 damage in the fight phase. So even he has uses. Fringe, but if you're at a club where 9 out of 10 players are Custodes, I'd actually bring him for that one ability.
Completely. Yeah, I would say Drukhari wish they had something that could make their battle shocks a bit more reliable for Custodians. Sending 10 Incubi in and just hoping the unlikely thing happens is not a good plan.
Sadly not.
No. So let's shimmy towards the matchups because we've been alluding to it already, but obviously as people know, there's a few top dogs in the game, and I think it's very reasonable to say that Death Guard have solid tools for most of them. So I think, if we start with Custodes, because you've alluded to it a bit already, they're obviously one of the meta menaces. How have you found that, and what solutions do Death Guard pack for that matchup?
Bring flamers, loads of flamers.
Yeah.
Anti-infantry doesn't care that you toughness 6, and then a lot of people like to take. And again, I don't think there's a right or wrong choice, but I personally always take -1 save against Custodes because they're just forcing them to roll 4-ups is your best bet. Again, if you're packing flamers, you don't need Mortarion as much because you don't really care about -1 damage because all your flamers are 1 damage anyway. And having the multi-phase threats because you obviously still got the melee as Death Guard. You can have a Plague Marine squad with all the heavy power weapons and the flamers as well. You can basically put your opponent in a case of, are you 4-up feeling no pain now, or are you 4-up feeling no pain after on the Wardens, and you can put out a lot of damage. I genuinely feel pretty good into Custodes matchup. I
Mhm.
am not too worried about it. Again, the hardest thing is just the Custodes effect, which is when they just roll all the 4-ups in a turn.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that happens to everyone though.
yeah.
That's just the live and die by the 4-up.
Mhm.
So you can have those turns, but you can get into a point where you can just lock down the board. You've got like bloat drones with the anti-infantry 2+ flamers to overwatch all over the place.
Mhm.
So even just moving, you can pick up maybe a model or two if you get lucky.
Yeah.
Um, I like the playcaster, that's why I bring it in, because
Mhm.
again, you can give the -2 to move. You can stack that, so you can put a unit on -4, which means a 2-inch move custodian with for -4 to charge is effectively dead at that point.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm not really care that you shoot bolt gunshots, woo. Um,
yeah.
but then the playcaster also packs on a 2-up in the shooting phase. You give a unit -1 to wound in combat till the end start of the next turn,
Okay.
which is really good because it means you can put like a plague bus crawler into a custodes brick, and then you actually double stack it. So I run 2. So even if they pop the +1 to wound strat, you take it back down again.
Wow.
So you
Nice.
-2 to wound. So they're wounding your plague bus crawler on 6s. So you can actually keep
Yes.
them there for quite a while, and he gets a 4-up
Yes.
save versus it. And if you're really worried, that's when you can also pop -1 damage stratagem on the tank,
Nice.
and you can just
Yes.
keep a custodes unit there. So let's say you go to spray a big brick in the middle, they pop the 4-up, feel no pain. You don't manage to trigger battle shock because remember you got 3 attempts. You bring 3 playbooks, you get 3 attempts
Yeah,
at battle shock for them to fail it. Let's say they pass them all, they get good luck. They pop the 4-up, feel no pain, they spike it. You go, okay, backup plan. Plagueless crawler, charge into the side of it,
chuck a tank
-2 to
in.
wound. Have fun with that. I'll shoot you next turn instead.
Yeah, exactly. No, amazing. Yeah, so that again, this is exactly what we're talking about with skill expression. Like this, you've got almost elfy control of movement, very sneaky shenanigans going on to keep them in place, and then if in doubt, shove a tank and buy yourself time. Very, very cool. And yeah, as you say, all of it's that same story where the little guns and the little weapons just add up very quickly into Custodes, and actually making them take more saves is better than just having a few high quality things that are going to bounce anyway. So actually, just absolutely covering them in shots is the way forward, and drowning them in flamers sounds like a very, very effective tool. How about what other sort of major meta menaces have you played into, and have you found it?
So we've got the Necrons. I think are probably the hardest.
Yes,
Hypercrypt is a pain, and it's
yes,
the reason I still run Plague Bus crawls even though they went up in points because I can't reliably chase the units around the board.
yeah,
Especially the scoring stuff. They can teleport like single destroyers, and I can't go and put like 3 Death Shroud to go and drop in to flame that guy because great, I've got a 4-inch moving unit now stuck in a corner that's basically
yes,
dead. Um, so having the PBCs that can sort of reach out and just pick up those scoring units. I ain't shooting at
yes.
Catan. I'm not shooting at the Immortal Bricks because I'm not going to kill enough of them. They're going to resurrect. They're there to just shoot stuff like, what is your scoring rubbish? Okay, like even Scarab Base is cool. I'll shoot them first. Because with if you manage to remove the scoring, if he then wants to use a Catan to go and do investigate signals, that's fine by me.
Mhm.
Like you can go and put your Catan in that corner. Okay, it'll teleport again next turn. Not much I can really do about that. And it's kind of one of those matchups where, unfortunately, it kind of feels like old Death Guard, where I can't stop you teleporting everywhere. I can mortar off what I can. So my only hope is basically to play the primary,
Yeah,
to
chase
sit
the
on it,
objectives. Yeah,
and basically say to you, you can teleport all around me and score your secondaries, but you'll lose on primary. So hopefully, those units that you're trying to teleport everywhere around with, you actually have to commit. And
yeah,
once you commit, I can actually then deal some damage back to you. Um,
completely, completely.
I wouldn't go chase them around. I think it's probably one of the hardest matchups for Death Guard at the
Yes,
moment.
yeah,
Because it's hypermobility, and that's
yeah.
always going to be Death Guard's
Yeah,
sort of
and it's
downside.
mobility on stuff that can do serious damage as well,
Yeah.
which is really nasty. Yeah, and I guess some of the earlier Necron stuff, like post Mortal Wound, Canoptech, and Awakened Dynasty, probably feels easier because it was coming to your favorite place.
Yeah, it comes close, and then
Yeah,
that's Wraiths especially is one of those matchups where you slap on the -1 to hit, you bring some Nurglings along for their -1 to hit aura, so now you got Wraiths
nice.
hit on you on 6s, so you're just like, okay, cool, we'll just literally slap each other for all eternity.
Mm,
Annoyingly, there are OC2 Wraiths, but again, that's why we bring
yeah,
like 10-man Plague Marines,
yeah,
and it kind of becomes a bit of a slap fest for a bit.
yeah,
Um, it, but in the end, you generally tend to sort of win out because once you start getting the effective objective, you can get sustained 2 on every 5s to hit, and then you can kind of just drown them in dice. Also, they
yeah.
still don't like anti-infantry flamers because the
No, they
crypt tech
don't.
as the infantry keyword. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
keep that guy alive. He's priceless.
Yeah. And if you can muscle out OC on 2 of the center objectives, they actually can't get the rerolls going. Because obviously they have to control more than half
Mm.
in the no man's land to get the full rerolls to hit. So if you can just keep like heavy pressure of Plague Marines, even Plague Burst Crawler, again, you find with Plague Burst Crawler being in combat because Wraiths just are never going to kill it. They hit on 6s, they wound it on 5s, and then you get what you call it. I think they're only AP1, aren't they, Wraiths?
Yeah.
So you get a free up save.
Yeah,
You'll be
it's
there
nothing.
all day.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad of a matchup. The Doomstalkers are probably the scariest thing there because obviously they can still shoot. But if you get into combat, you're all right because then they got blast and they can't shoot you. So you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Much easier than Hypocrites. And unfortunately, I think the Necron players are starting to learn that Hypocrite might be a bit better.
That's the way they're heading. Yeah, it's one of those ones where I think it has some faceplant matchups, and it's a bit less. I will just muscle my way through several games than the other two, but I think it has the outs for dealing with a lot of the other better armies in the game, which is
I agree.
why they're going to head in that direction, I think. So what else? What else at the top of the game are you sort of thinking about, and what sort of solutions have you got? I mean, I guess those are the two sort of main boogeymen that come to mind. What else have you been playing into?
So I'm trying to think what are actually the things that, because it's so weird to talk about the meta at the moment because there's not really anything else apart
We're
them. Like
still sort of learning. Yeah, I mean, have you
still
played
learning.
Guard at all? What's
I've
Guard like?
I've played against Guard. Guard's weird. It's an interesting one. It really depends what they bring, but a lot of it is stay in the Rhino. Stay in the Rhino as much as can. There are some games versus Guard where you can. So if they haven't brought any like direct stuff, like they've only brought one tank commander, that's a game where if you brought Morty, you just run at them.
Yeah.
Because then Morty gets into them, and as soon as the -1 ballistic skill weapon skill gets into their like castle,
Yes.
it's a nightmare for them. The infantry aren't a problem. You just spray them away with
Yeah.
anything. It doesn't really matter. Again, Bulgrin, if you have Mortarion, the -1 damage, you don't care. They aren't tough. They just die.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem sort of comes down to the biggest problem against Guard, and it's probably the same problem everyone else has, if they have a hot turn of indirect.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard, and it is going to hit you at some point. Yeah.
If the Manticore pops off and you lose a Rhino early,
that's the thing. It's if the transports go right. That's the killer thing.
If your transports manage to live enough for you to like get onto either midboard or into their lines and start touching stuff and locking stuff up, you're in a good position. If they get a really hot first turn, your Rhinos pop turn 1. There's not really much you can do to pull back from that because you're just too slow. They then just can do stuff like screening you out, etc., and just keep firing indirect. I won't lie. It's probably one of my least favorite games to play, and I feel a bit sorry for the Guard as well because I don't like the fact like they have to just do that.
Yeah,
does that make sense? It's not the most fun for them, I suppose. No. But it's such a weird one Guard matchup because sometimes you can just roll over it. Mm-hmm. Your infantry, because you got all the multi-phase damage, all the anti-infantry, like I said, their primary holds is only Bulgrin, not really an issue. If something wants to come and contest on primary, you have all the flamers to overwatch the guardsman squad, so they can't get the OC on there. It's one of those matches where I think because you can't out indirect them, their indirects just better. You use Plague Burst Crawlers aggressively, you use them to hold points, and again, if they haven't brought lots of tank commanders, and the more hoping for the chip away damage from the indirect over turn, then you kind of just try and get the primary lead early, take some decent secondaries and try and get into that castle. But easier said than done. We don't have too many Guard players around here.
No, we really don't. They've been thin on the ground. Yeah.
There's also a thing with like, so this is like no offense to anyone because Death Guard have the same thing. Certain factions have types of players that are there for a good time.
Yes, I agree.
Orc players are a great example.
There
are some horrendously scary Orc players who are really, really good. But then you have other Orc players that just want to yell "War" and run everything at your turn 1.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So I do think I know the meme at the moment is S tier Guard, isn't it?
We're not wading quite into that.
No, we're not wading into that. But like, it's Guard can be really scary, but the amount of people that are good enough at Guard to bring, I'm not really going to tailor for. If I run into it, I think that's just sod's law. And it's just like, okay, fair enough. I got unlucky on that. Whereas like trying to prepare for something like Custodes, which everyone and his mum's now running, is a much more like worthwhile investment of time.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. It's interesting because I'd say I would agree with you that I think historically Death Guard have one of those player bases too, right? Where I think a lot of the people that play Death Guard just freaking love Death Guard because they're not typically like top of the meta, and they are one of those armies that often has a particular set of limitations. And I'm curious to see the extent to which that changes, because as I say, I think they're probably top of the pile for chaos, and
Yeah.
chaos players do often head to the top of the pile. So I expect we are going to see more and more of it. Which it did give me a couple of follow-up questions for you, which is, where do you stand on things like brigands and things like demon allies after the slate?
So, demon allies in general, Nurglings are still great.
Still amazing, yeah.
It's 5 points. Woo, you know, I'm still taking them.
That was insane. It's like, what are you doing? Like, that does
So,
nothing.
and the battle line, so the other change didn't affect them. So you're like,
Yeah,
cool. They have really good synergy with us because you can stack the -1 to hit or
they
with the
do.
-1 Blizzard
And
skill.
it's thematic as fuck to have Nurglies and
Yeah,
Death Guard as well,
they're
because
literally on our own models.
I love I think probably one of my favorite 40k audiobooks is The Lords of Silence, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Death Guard one, and the Nurglings in that. There's some amazing like set pieces with Nurglings where they're like taking over a land speeder and crashing it, all that shit. And I just they're iconic. They fit together.
They're as much
It's a
part of
good
Death
pairing.
Guard as they are
Exactly.
Nurgle
I
demons.
completely
So
agree. The little lords have got to be along for the
yeah,
ride.
you got to bring your lords. And they just give options where like infiltrate's really good to have. It's deep strike, so it's good for secondaries. So they're just still taking Nurglings.
Yeah,
5 points
yeah,
isn't going to make you not take him.
definitely.
Plague Bear has actually weirdly become interesting. Um,
Yes.
they got quite a bit cheaper, like 110 now for 10,
Hmm.
and it's 10 bodies with 2 runes, 5 up invuln, T5, OC2. But the +1 to charge is quite interesting to come in from deep strike. You got an 8-inch charge
Yes.
instead. They're not going to set the world on fire, but if you just want to have bodies for OC for taking people off primary, and you're
Yes.
not too worried about damage, they're a great cheaper alternative to your like Plague Marine squad.
Yes.
Um, so it's 190 points compared to like 110. So you've almost got
Yes.
a bloat drone in the difference there. So find
Yeah.
10 more points, you got a bloat drone and 10 guys, which have natural deep strike as well. So
Yes.
they're quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
The rest is a bit more up in the air. Rotogus is an interesting
Yes.
distraction kind of effects.
Yes.
And I think he also depends a lot on terrain you play on because boy is thick.
Yeah.
Trying to get him on like
Yeah.
UKTC can be a bit
My
rough.
OG Death Guard list was great on Clearwater Death Guard shit, and it was great fun, but getting that guy around is always a hassle.
Such a pain. But he does actually, he's not bad and he's dirty. Like 230 points or something daft now, Grey and Clean ones. So
Mm.
they're actually not awful. And they're definitely a great distraction. If you make good at making 4-ups, that thing can live for a long time.
Oh, it really can.
So that demon side's pretty good in general. Like Beast and Nurgle are also decent. The only one I probably wouldn't touch is probably the Plague drones because it's just a
Yeah.
bloat drone is just
Don't
better.
really know what the point of them is at the moment. They're in a weird
Yeah,
spot.
that like even the rules like cool. You got +1 to wound if you or 3 roll wounds if you Nurgle demon against whatever.
Yeah.
But the rest of them are all pretty good. When it comes to the Chaos Knight side,
Yes.
I am personally anti Chaos Knight,
Okay. Cool.
but it's not because they're not good. It's just a personal thing. I when Death Guard was sort of like not great, and the going joke was, oh, how do you make a Death Guard list? Well, you take 1,500 points of allies, and then take 500 points of Death Guard. I was like, okay. And people still, even when we got buffed, the running thing was, oh, yeah, but you can't play Death Guard if you don't have 3 Brigands. So I made like a personal goal to show you don't need Brigands.
Yeah. I respect it.
Brigands are great, don't be wrong.
Yeah.
And they're really, really good. And I still think they're really good. We've still seen people having success with 3 Brigand builds.
I mean, hitting on 2s with a melter gun's just a good time.
Yeah, it's
isn't
great.
it?
Unless you're me, apparently, you can't roll to wound for anything with those things. I did try them out once, and I was like, this is a sign from Nurgle. Like I got 3 of them in melter range of 1 Execrate and didn't do a single wound to it. I was like, really?
My word. Yeah, that's your god reaching out to you and saying, no, stay on the true path.
Yeah, but they're really good. Their carnivores are also super interesting. If you and again, the cool thing with the Death Guard book is there is options and list choices for different types of players. People always forget, even within factions, I will not be the best Death Guard player at being an aggressive player because I'm not naturally an aggressive player. I'm very tradey, very more long-term thing. Will, for example, who does the podcast with me, he'll say himself he's not the best Death Guard player, but he plays a much more aggressive game.
Yeah.
So he likes going like triple carnivore, triple bloat drone, Morty, but his Morty's doing a complete different purpose. It's not sitting back to play the scrolls. It's a tough body running at you.
Yeah.
So they can be really cool in that regard. Also really nice to have something that moves fast. The only thing is you wish you could still use the stratagem to walk through walls, but you know, unfortunately can't have everything. But I don't think they're necessary. We had an interview which will be up on our channel soon with Liam VSL. So people that know Liam, He kind of made the Death Guard list of the 30 Plague Mage Triple Brigand. He's now dropped Brigands. And when we interviewed him, we asked him, is that because you're in teams and you're taking a Chaos Knight player? He was like, originally, yes, because obviously in teams you can't double take the armies. But then they dropped the Chaos Knights from the list, and they were like, oh, you can have the Brigands back. And he was like, no, I'm good. So that is vindication
that tells
for
you
me.
enough. That tells you enough. You're just showing Liam VSL the way, as always, Aiden. I've got no doubt.
What can I say? He's probably got a shirt with my face on it and everything.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. Amazing.
So I think if you like allies, again, you can bring them. Chaos Knights are viable. Even like the Executioner's not awful because you get the AP2 on the autocans. Because again, our army faction ability works with allies because it reduces the opponent's save, doesn't buff our AP, so allies can take benefit. But yeah, you can go allies, you can go allyless, knights, demons. Again, that's one thing I love about the army in the state of it at the moment. So much stuff is viable.
Yes. Yeah, and it's genuinely an absolute toolbox. As you say, the internal balance of it is amazing. They found a way to get it into a really nice spot design wise, and it's an army people are afraid to play against, and that's kind of what you want Death Guard to be. And that's a nice spot because I say they don't get enough respect. Death Guard, they always come in for a bit of a joke and a bit of mocking, and I think it's really cool and very exciting to see them up towards the top of the pile. And I think they should have a really good few months now. Looking forward,
yeah,
I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm going to ask you to wish list something before we go. Obviously, we've got no sign of when the Death Guard book will be, but I'm gonna ask you for a couple of detachment themes you might want to see, and B, if you could get a new Death Guard unit, what would you want?
Right. Okay. So first detachment I want back is Terminus Est.
Hell yeah!
So I played Terminus Est. I painted 120 Poxwalkers.
I love Poxwalkers.
So people that don't know what Terminus Est is, it is a Poxwalker mass infantry themed detachment. It existed last edition with its own rule set. It was really different, really fun to play. And Poxwalkers, when you get the whole zombie horde going, it can it's really
so
fun.
cool. And Typhus never looks as cool as when he's got a bunch of zombies.
Yeah, like I played a more casual teams event. Don't get me wrong, but having 120 Poxwalkers on the table, Typhus in the middle, and just some Plague Rains and Death Shroud here and there between. I went against an opponent who was like playing knights, and he just had like 2 Castellans, and he was like, the fuck do I do against this? And I was like, go, my minions.
You drown. That's what you do.
So that would be really cool to see.
That'd be amazing, yeah.
I'd definitely like to see that. The other one that would be cool to sort of see come. I know a lot of people are going to say like a Demon Engine one, which is fine, but again, I'm not really a good car park player. But I would like to see one that sort of maybe does harken a bit back to a durability build. Okay. Just so we have the option there to sort of play. I want to be like pseudo Custodes for a game.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, especially if you're in like a team setting, it would really open up builds because that would then go from an army that's trying to like get the big win to that I'm just going to try and stay alive and get 50 points.
Yeah. I think one like that emphasized Death Shroud and Blight Lords would be really cool. Where it's like here come the really tanky boys.
Yeah, like here come the thick boys. So I'm not saying I'm not saying go back and slam 5 up field up anything because that's a boring way to do it. But I'm sure they can think of a cool way.
I think they will. I have.
And I'm not allowed to ask for it, even though I'm gonna want it. Do we get an uppy downy?
Oh no!
Everyone else has
relocating Death Shroud. Fuck that noise.
You can step into the Garden of Nurgle and reappear elsewhere.
Spending a whole game with bloat drones just dropping into different corners, and elves would die even harder than they already do. I think
it's like teleporting Death Shroud every turn, just flaming everything.
3-inch deep strike up downy Death Guard. I hope not. God, I really hope not.
just to clarify, please don't give us that. That would be the most murderous of
that
like
feeling when you
fluff.
Get Mortarion in your deployment zone turn 1. Oh no!
I certainly know they'll caveat that. They'll be like any unit except Mortarion.
Yeah. They will. They'll see it coming. Okay, and how about a unit? What would you like to see added to the roster?
Okay, so we'll go over serious choice and like a more of like a daft choice. Daft choice is the Plague Tower. I don't know if you know what a Plague Tower is. It is a Titanic sort of unit back from like Epic, where it's like an old, like almost like siege tower you have in medieval times with like 3 giant like flamethrowers on the front that just spew corrosive acid.
Amazing.
It would just be fun. It could just be like a 40 unit transport or something like that.
Yeah,
that's really tough to kill.
Fun.
And literally, you put it in the middle of the table and you go, "I'm going to roll this towards you." And if it reaches you, you're screwed.
I love it. Little nurglings hanging off it. That'd be great. That'd
Yeah,
be really, really fun.
so that'd be cool. And then for a sort of like a more serious one, I don't think we need too much like in terms of extra units. To be honest with you, I think Death Guard range is already really good. A cool one I'd rather like to see rather than a new unit would be a different loadout for the Blight Haulers, which is more like
That would be
anti-infantry.
cool. Yeah, that would be
if
cool.
if I could get like one plague spitter, so it's got like one flamer on it, and then maybe like a heavy blight launch on the other side, so the thing just runs around like a little Dakka bot. That'd be really cool because the multi melter and the missile launch is decent, but like if you're not hunting tanks, it's not really something you want.
Yeah.
So being able to be like, and it'd be even cool, you know, mix and match. I'm gonna be like, yeah, there's one melter boy in that unit of 3 and 2 anti-infantry. So if I run into it, you're right, I can pop it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would
that
be
would be
cool.
cool. That's one of those units that always struggles to quite make the cut, doesn't it? So it'd be nice to see them
Yeah,
find new ways to make it relevant.
yeah. So I think that's probably what I'd go for. I know it's a bit
Awesome.
of a cop out on the new unit
No,
thing,
no,
but
no, that's fine. I'd say that plague tower, man, bring it on. That's what we're going for. 40 plague marines in a plague tower just rolling to the middle. Let's do it. Right, Aiden. It has been amazing having you on. You've been an absolute fount of knowledge, as I knew you would be. So thanks so much for coming on.
cheers for having me on.
And do everybody check out the Disgustingly Resilient podcast. If you are a Death Guard fan, then that is where you will get all the trips and tricks you need to play that army to the best of its ability. So get out there and enjoy that. Thanks so much, and we will be back again soon to chat more. So thanks very much for listening. Bye bye.
See you later.